So, Paul, welcome to this interview. I'm very delighted that we can talk a little bit about the just ended Synod.
All right.
Now, I understand that you were invited by the Vatican as an expert. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about what exactly your role was in the Synod?
Mm-hmm. I was one of the 45 appointed experts. I'm supposed to listen to the bishops and to write down what they say, the key issues they raised during the first week, and help the special secretary write a report of all the conversation, and then help the special secretary write the propositions. Come from small groups, and during these groups discussions, as an expert, I'm there to help the bishops.
What do you think now at the end of the Synod was some of the most valuable fruits of the Synod? Briefly, let's say we can indicate about 3 fruits.
The simple fact that the Pope got the opportunity to hear bishops coming from all over the world, and he said it on Saturday. He was happy to see that the Church is Catholic from the variety of the experiences. The second is the awareness that new evangelization is a complex issue. It's not relevant for the West, it's relevant for the whole Church. Now, the key problem when we talk about new evangelization may not be framed the same way either in Europe or in Asia, but the concept is basically important for the whole Church. The third fruit, I would say, is the bishops became aware, and in a deep sense, that the Church is the same, but what is experienced in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, is different from what is going on in Europe.
Right.
So that's important. Uniformity is not a sign of unity. So that was very clearly stated.
Do you think this will now impact the way the churches experience and grow in Africa, Asia, and other cultures that are different from the West?
My impression is that what we technically call the reception of a synod depends on the bishops. I can say that Latin America is really deeply prepared for a good reception of the synod. And I am sure that they will go back with key and clear ideas on what to implement. But I'm not sure that Africa is deeply prepared. Asia, I don't know much about what is going on in Asia, but my impression is that something will happen in some countries in Asia. India, for instance, and the Philippines. The Middle East is a special region, and I think they will consider the fruit of this synod in their context, but I can't be very specific.
What do you think would be some of the characteristics between those countries that you consider prepared and those countries perhaps have yet to prepare themselves to receive the fruits of the Synod?
Well, the key difference to me is the structure of the conferences. You see, one of the most structured conferences, continental conferences, is Latin America, CELAM. CELAM is well structured. And the second is Asia. Asia has an Episcopal conference well structured.
Right.
Africa is really shaky.
Were there guidelines given or a time frame for a follow-up action program?
There is what we call the post-synodal council made up of 15 bishops elected during, 12 are elected during the synod, and 3 are appointed by the Pope. And these bishops are in charge of the follow-up.
What do you think was some of the main issues?
From my point of view, I think all of us will go back home with the idea that we need a better commitment as Christians. Our faith is really dying to some extent because of the secular ambiance of the world today. It may not be the whole world or the whole church, but I think secularism is a challenge for our faith. So we need to revive our faith. That's what I see. The second thing is the context. Our context today is a challenge. And the language of the context is a new language. We need to really study.
One of the things that we see in the global situation is the experience of religious pluralism across the world, for example, right now.
Right.
More so in some countries, like maybe Africa and Asia, than in other countries. But in general, I think this is a universal phenomenon now.
That's right.
Was this an issue that was much discussed, and how do we relate to other religions?
The Synod Fathers coming from Asia, from Africa, wanted to discuss these issues. But the West was more concerned about secularism. Until the end of the Synod, I think, let me say it, but I don't really mean agenda, but the concern of the West was the main issue of the Synod. So I think that some of the Synod Fathers, mainly those coming from Asia and Africa, will go back a little bit disappointed because they wanted to really discuss, to engage these issues.
Right.
Maybe the methodology of the Synod doesn't make room for that. So we need to question the methodology. Maybe it's because the theme was too broad, new evangelization. But your question is it's an important one, and it's still to be addressed.
Even the concept of new evangelization is to be interpreted by different cultures and different countries in different ways.
That's right.
Was much said about the very concept, the very theme of the Synod, like new evangelization? How is it new for different parts of the world?
Well, I think the awareness that the concept is still to be clearly defined was there. But they didn't find the right way to bring it to the table and discuss it. Today, one of the bishops remarked that the Pope gave 2 understandings of new evangelization.
Okay.
So,
and what might these be? Briefly?
Briefly, it means those who are baptized but don't live out their faith, let's bring them back to the church, the community. And second, those who don't know Christ, let's bring Christ to them. Now, it's really a problem. But I would say there is a consensus on understanding the new evangelization as the continuing evangelization, but in a new context. So what is new is not the fact that the church should evangelize, but what is new is the context.
Okay. How do the local bishops deal then with the problem, for example, in Africa and in Asia, where there is tremendous religious pluralism, with the basic theological position of the uniqueness of Christ, that Jesus Christ is the only Savior, which is a basic position of the church. And was this talked about by some bishops, particularly coming from countries that are considered missionary countries, about how they would address such an issue in this context?
Well, I saw a proposition on interreligious dialogue. So I think that the issue was discussed in small groups. But since I was in one of the small groups which did not discuss this issue in depth, I can't really say that it was not talked about. Not in the General Assembly, but maybe in small groups. What I can say is that in my small group, we had people from the Middle East, and they said that they can't really talk about Jesus in a Muslim world. They can live with, dialogue of life is more important for them than preaching on Jesus or talking about Jesus.
What is expected of the lay person in the church, and how can they be given a greater role in evangelization in the church? Was some of that discussed?
Yes, indeed. It was strongly discussed, and it appeared very clearly that the laity is at the center of the new evangelization. Now, if we want the laity to be the presence of the church in the world, in politics, in the economic world, etc., the bishops said that we should create centers, programs for their formation. We should provide very good formation to the laity in order to allow them to be fully engaged in society.
And similarly, also did issues come about the role of women in the church, because they form such a large number of the faithful?
The issue came up, and there is a proposition on women, recognizing their contribution in the church, their role in the church. But I think that the bishops and the whole church is still looking for the best way to make room for women in the church, in terms of leadership, for instance. But in the Synod, I didn't hear anything specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The issue was raised, but not dealt with in depth.
Okay.
The methodology didn't allow for a good discussion on key issues. Right. So they touched upon a few issues and left them hanging, actually.
Okay. When you look back at this whole experience, what do you think could have been done better?
Basically, I think we should have prepared this synod as the 1974 synod did, asking all the continents to read their situation and bring it to the synod. But I think, we can't just remain on what hasn't been done. We can move forward with the awareness that we must listen to the world.
Okay. You feel that at least with whatever came out of the synod, we can work on it and improve the situations in our local churches, etc.
Exactly. Our faith can make the world better, can reshape the world. So I'm going back home with a sense of hope that my faith can help me take initiatives that can reshape the context where I live.
Well, Paul, thank you very much for sharing with us your ideas and your experience of the Synod.
Thank you.
Obviously, it has been a very impressive and a very happy experience for you.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Thank you.